So, bouncing threats have been a thing for as long as the game itself. Today, most blue decks in Modern have some bounce effects, be it in the land slot or on a body, and in this video, I will show you the best ways to use your bounce effects. So for Indomitable Creativity, if they have an Arcana Cruelty already out, that is the card to bounce because it's unlikely they can do anything with it for a few turns when it is stuck in their hand. Yet if they play Indomitable Creativity for one, only targeting a Dwarf token for example, then you should bounce the token, that way it isn't destroyed and the Indomitable Creativity fizzles. The reason to do this rather than bounce Arcana Cruelty once it hits the battlefield is because you don't want that ETB trigger to happen. You should also do the same if they cast Transmorgify. When it comes to Murktide, the best card to bounce is Murktide Regent or Ledger Shredder, when they have a lot of +1/+1 counters accumulated, since bouncing those will refresh the counters. If you can't block or kill a Ravaghan attacking you, it's important to bounce it if you can to prevent taking the hit. Also, if you really need your colored sources, you can bounce Blood Moon if they have it out, yet only in the right circumstances, when you can cast something game-changing that turn when you couldn't have beforehand because of the Blood Moon. For Hammer Time, you really only want to bounce a creature equipped with Colossus Hammer, but if they do have Coldra Complete or Batter Skull on a creature, then you could justify bouncing those equipment or the creatures with the equipment. For Rakdos Midrange, it really depends on the opponent's board state. Are you being attacked by Ravaghan with no blockers? Is a Liliana of the Veil about to ultimate? Are you going to die to Dauthi Voidwalker if you pass through to your opponent's next turn? You need to decide what is most threatening in the current board state. Yet as a rule of thumb, I would recommend, once Fury and Seasoned Pyromancer hit the battlefield, don't bounce them because you don't want your opponent replaying them for the ETB effect. For 4 Color Omnath, almost every single creature has an ETB effect, so I would recommend trying to bounce a creature that is being targeted with Ephemerite to fizzle the Ephemerite, yet you can also make an attempt to bounce Planeswalkers, yet only when you can't kill it in the next turn or two, and if you need to bring back a threat for a turn, you could bounce Leyline Binding on your opponent's end step, yet other than that, I would keep most of your bounce effects in hand until you really need them. For Crashing Footfalls, the card you will most likely bounce is a Rhino token created with Crashing Footfalls. This is because the token disappears when moving to another zone, in this case the hand. This is the best target because almost every card in that deck has an ETB effect. Sometimes you will bounce a Leyline Binding for the situation I described earlier, and I would only really use a bounce effect not targeting those 2 cards if I were in a desperate state. For burn, you should really just bounce the creature that saves you the most life. If you want to bounce Goblin Guy, do it after they declare attackers, but before combat. This is so the attack trigger happens and you have a chance of getting a land off the trigger. Also, if you want to cast a few spells, yet you will take too much off of Eidolon of the Great Revel, then you can bounce it for that turn. And for Amulet Titan, the main cards you want to bounce are Primeval Titan and Dryad of the Elysian Grove. When it comes to deciding which one to bounce, I would bounce Dryad of the Elysian Grove when Valakut the Molten Pinnacle starts triggering, and I would bounce Primeval Titan when it is close to killing you, and do it before combat so you don't let them get an attack trigger. Now, if you can bounce Amulet of Vigor really early before they get any value with it, you could argue about bouncing it, yet I wouldn't typically do that, and I wouldn't bounce Azusa since after it resolves they have priority to play a land, and by then it isn't really worth it. I wouldn't bounce Cultivator Colossus in most cases unless it's swinging it in for lethal because you really don't want them to replay it and get another ETB effect. Don't bounce a Boreal Grazer or Sakura Tribe Elder unless you have lethal on board and those creatures are in your way of getting it to your opponent's face. Lastly, for Yawgmoth Combo, if you want to slow them down a little, you could bounce a turn 1 Mana Dork before they get value with it, yet the main card you want to bounce is Yawgmoth because without Yawgmoth, the deck really doesn't do anything, so keeping it off the board as long as possible is a good plan. If it is more late or mid-game and Grist becomes a problem, then you could justify bouncing it as well. And if you want to know which counterspells you should run your modern decks, then you can check that out here. And with that said, I'll see you next time.